I learned my marriage was a business plan the night my partner wired my life savings to an account I didn't recognize. And my wife texted him a heart for doing it. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't shout. I stood in the dark of the parking lot behind our warehouse, breathing in cold air that tasted like metal, and counted to 10. Then I opened the finance app again. Same numbers, same destination, same note, clean split before launch. Launch of what? My company's new logistics platform, the one I built at my kitchen table while the city slept. The one I trusted Marcus to pitch and Ava to protect because she said she believed in me more than anyone. A truck door slammed. Marcus stepped out, spotted me, and hesitated. "You're early," he said. "So are you," I answered. He looked past me like there might be cameras. "Let's not do drama tonight." "Where's the money?" He shifted his weight. "Secured. The investors wanted everything clean." "Investors or Ava?" He didn't blink, and that told me enough. I let the silence stretch until the motion lights timed out and the loading bay fell into shadow. If he walked now, I had nothing but a knot in my gut and a screenshot. If I moved first, I had a chance. I put the phone in my pocket and kept my voice steady. "You think I didn't build a back door?" He smirked. "You always said you hated surprises." "Not tonight," I said, and walked past him into the warehouse. He followed. The echo made every step count. I headed for the server rack, entered a code only I knew, and watched a green cursor blink. The platform was ready to go live at midnight across 3 pilot cities. I'd written the failsafe months ago when Marcus started skipping meetings, and Ava stopped asking how my day went. Paranoia felt ugly then. It felt useful now. "Ethan," he said closer, "be smart. You get your cut after the launch. You can't run tech and sales. Let me handle the story. Investors trust me." "They trust results," I said, fingers on the keyboard. "And I'm the one who ships." He laughed under his breath. "You're not shipping anything without signatures. The IP is in the LLC, our LLC. Ava signed off on the operating agreement. You saw it." I had. I also knew the clause he didn't. A maintenance lock I could trigger if a breach was likely to harm clients. Harm was vague by design. I'd written it that way and buried it in a section only founders read. I typed the first command and felt the hum shift as background processes paused. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at me. "Don't do this." "You already did," I said. He moved fast, but not faster than the lock. The screen flashed confirmation. The platform froze at pre-launch. The money was still gone. The code was now mine to reclaim if I could buy time. Marcus swore and grabbed my arm. I shook him off. We weren't kids. I didn't owe him a fight. "Call Ava," I said. "Tell her we're delaying." He stared. "You think she answers me if I say your name?" She answered your heart emoji. His jaw tightened. That told me the text wasn't a bluff. Good. I needed him off balance. "Why?" I asked. "Say it out loud." He looked at the servers like they could explain me to him. "You build, I sell. She keeps the walls up. That's what she said. You never wanted the rooms we're about to walk into. You hate fundraisers. You hate handshakes. You hate people." "I hate liars." "You hate losing control." He tried a different angle. "Grow up. You'll get paid. We'll all get paid. Why blow it because you can't share credit?" He didn't say, "Share Ava." He didn't have to. "Launch is off," I said. "Tell the investors we'll send a new timeline tomorrow." He laughed again, but softer. Pitying. "You still think you're in command because you wrote the code. Cute. The press release is scheduled. The board is assembled. Ava is with them right now, and she'll walk out and smile and say the word we like. She means you." That stung more than I expected. Not because of the lie, because of the muscle memory of wanting it to be true. He stepped closer. "Take the buyout, Ethan." I built this so drivers wouldn't waste hours rotting in lots, so small carriers wouldn't get squeezed. I built it because people trusted me to make the wait shorter. You want a buyout? Steal someone else's. He lifted his hands. Then congratulations. You just burned your company for a principle. Not burned, I said. Paused. The word landed. He understood. He couldn't turn the system on without me. Investors wouldn't throw money at a platform stalled by a founder invoking a protective clause. To force my hand, they'd need to prove harm. That takes time. Time is leverage. Marcus's phone buzzed again. He checked it and flinched. She wants to talk to you. Put it on speaker. He did. Ava's voice came through clear, calm. Ethan, don't make this hard. You made it easy, I said. You're emotional. This is business. Then let's do business. Return the funds. We launch on our terms in 2 weeks. No board seats for your investors unless they bring value, not threats. A pause. You won't get another offer this clean. I'm not the one laundering my marriage through term sheets. Silence. Then, if you force a delay, they'll sue. You can't afford that. I can't afford you? She exhaled, and for the first time I heard something like nerves. Not regret, calculation slipping. Think about the drivers, she said. Think about the families depending on better routes. You'll hold them hostage because you're hurt. I looked at the code. I thought about the owners who emailed me spreadsheets at midnight, begging for predictability. I thought about the kid who shadowed me last month and asked how to build something honest in a world that wasn't. I thought about the ring I wore because a woman said she believed. Fine, I said. You want the platform on time? New conditions. 1. I retain full technical control. 2. Every contract is transparent to carriers. No hidden fees, no exclusivity traps. 3. The money you moved comes back tonight. Marcus turned away, hand over his mouth, like he was watching a show he'd paid to star in but didn't get cast. Ava didn't answer. I kept going. 4. You resigned from the LLC after launch. Marcus spun. What? You heard me, I said. You two want to build something together. Do it without my name on the door. Ava's tone dropped a shade colder. Ethan, don't be theatrical. Then give me a number, I said. 30 seconds. After that, the lock extends to the client portal and I email the pilot carriers explaining exactly why. Don't, Marcus started. 25, I said. Ava muttered something I couldn't make out, then came back dry. You'll get an escrow confirmation within the hour. We launch with your conditions. Afterward, I'm gone. And Marcus? I asked. He'll make his own choices. The call ended. Marcus stared at me like I'd pulled a coin from his ear and called it justice. You think you won? He said. I think I bought a window. For what? For the truth to catch up. He shook his head and walked out. I stayed until the server lights settled into a steady rhythm. My hands were steady too, but for different reasons. Fear was still there, elbowing for space with relief. I didn't know if the escrow would hit. I didn't know if the lawsuits would swarm. I knew only this. Tomorrow we'd launch something that wouldn't bleed the people it claimed to help. And after that, I'd end a marriage. I should have questioned the day my wife learned my password faster than she learned my favorite song. On the way home, the sky over the lake was flat and dark. I pulled over where the shoulder widened and took a coin from the console, an old habit from long drives and bad decisions. Heads meant move, tails meant wait. I flipped it, caught it, and didn't look. I already knew. The escrow hit at 12:07 a.m., a clean receipt, not a promise. I stared at the confirmation until the numbers felt solid under my eyes, then unlocked the final process. The platform woke like a switchyard. Queues spun up, routes compiled, drivers pinged in. No speeches, no countdown. Just work moving the way it should have from the beginning. I stayed until the pilot carriers responded. Fewer idle hours, cleaner handoffs, fewer dead miles. One dispatcher wrote, "If this holds a week, you've paid 2 salaries." That line did more for my pulse than any investor deck. At 6 a.m., I sent 2 messages. To carriers, a short note, and a link to the new transparency portal, fees visible, service terms in plain language, cancellation 1 click away. To Ava, a copy of the signed resignation letter with dates already agreed on, plus a calendar hold for the board call that afternoon. No swearing, no blame, just logistics. She replied 10 minutes later. We'll handle optics together. Unified voice matters. We're no longer a we, I wrote. Keep the call. By noon, Marcus tried a different door. He forwarded a strategic partnership he'd drafted with a freight broker that wanted exclusivity in 3 regions. The contract locked carriers into penalties if they took outside work during peak weeks. He had buried those penalties in an appendix. I wrote back one line, declined. Our policy is service, not restriction. He called. They'll bring 7 figures inside 6 months. By strangling the people we say we help. Welcome to scale. I'll stay small before I sell that. He hung up with an old curse he used when code wouldn't compile. I filed the contract in a folder labeled If They Sue. The board call started at 3. I joined from a quiet conference room with a hard chair and a door that closed. Marcus was on, expression tight. Ava joined late, voice flat like nothing had cracked. 2 independent directors listened more than they spoke. That was good. Listening people make fewer messes. Ava began with numbers. Launch succeeded. Engagement above projections. We have inbound interest from 3 funds, I cut in. Before funding, we need to address governance. Marcus made a noise. Here we go. I shared my screen. First slide, the April wire out of operating cash with Marcus's approvals and Ava's acknowledgement. Second, the maintenance lock clause they'd accused me of abusing. Third, a timeline showing when I requested the return, when escrow landed, when the system launched. Fourth, the exclusivity contract he'd tried to push that morning. We're not debating intent, I said. We're establishing risk. If I hadn't locked the system, we'd have launched with money missing and a predatory deal queued. Both expose clients and us. That's not leadership. That's gambling with other people's hours. Silence. Then one director asked the only question that mattered. Do we have ongoing exposure? Yes, I said, if we keep anyone in control who thinks the goal is extraction. Ava spoke carefully. We made a mistake under pressure. We corrected it. Let's move forward. Moving forward starts with honoring your resignation, I said, and pulled up the document she'd agreed to at midnight. Marcus leaned toward his camera. You can't force her out. She agreed. She can confirm. A beat. I'll transition out after the quarter, Ava said. 30 days, I answered. Per the document. The director nodded. Accepted, Marcus exploded. You're letting him stage a coup because he has the keyboard. I opened the last slide. A log of outbound emails from Marcus's account to a competitor 4 months ago, trading product insight for introductions. Not illegal, not loyal. Each line ended with a tiny thank you emoji. You weren't selling the story, I said. You were selling the map. He swore again. The directors ended his contract before the call ended. No shouting, just terms. He was stunned less by the firing than by the lack of ceremony. People who live on rooms full of eyes don't plan for silence. After the call, I walked the floor. Dispatchers were comparing route heat maps to last week's. One driver FaceTimed in from a yard I knew for wasting time. He was already rolling. The good part of building is that the good parts keep proving themselves without you. Ava texted later. Meet, no lawyers, 10 minutes. I chose a coffee place near the courthouse, not for symbolism, for cameras in case she tried to spin a scene. She arrived with nothing in her hands, which meant everything was already filed elsewhere. You humiliated me, she said. You wrote your own ending, I said. I just refused to ghostwrite it. You think they'll keep you clean after I'm gone? They'll tempt you with shortcuts too. I'll say no. You said yes to me. I said yes to you before I learned the cost. She studied me like I was still persuadable. You loved the idea of me believing in you. I loved believing in you. She thought about that, then shrugged, as if that were an outdated bill she'd already paid. Do we fight in court or finish this quiet? Quiet, I said. You exit. You don't defame. I don't drag your name through every thread. We part. And the marriage? I've already filed. Her jaw moved like she was tasting a word she didn't like. You'll be alone, she said, not as a curse but as information. I'd rather be alone than owned, I said. She left without another look. No scene, no threat, just subtraction. That night, I wrote an open letter to carriers and drivers. Not a manifesto, 2 paragraphs. We'd made mistakes. We fixed them. Our promise was speed without traps. Our books would reflect that. If we failed, cancel with 1 click and tell everyone why. I attached a change log. People underestimate how much trust lives in a simple log. By week's end, churn was low, new sign-ups steady, support tickets half what we expected. A small paper ran a piece about a logistics startup choosing fairness over friction. We didn't trend. Good, trending burns. Marcus sent one last email, a threat dressed as advice. Investors will freeze you out. You don't know how this game works. I replied with a link to the portal where any carrier could see every fee we charged. I'm not playing your game. I slept for the first time in a month. When I woke, there was a voicemail from a fund I'd written off years ago because they backed extractive models. The message was short. We've changed our mandate. Let's talk. Maybe they had, maybe they hadn't. Either way, my answer would start with the same 3 lines it would have ended with if last night had gone differently. Driver first, carrier choice, no locks. I drove to the lake again, pulled to the shoulder and took out the coin. Heads meant move, tails meant wait. I flipped it, caught it, slapped it to my wrist and checked. Tails. For once, I listened. Waiting didn't mean doing nothing. It meant letting the work speak before I did. It meant documenting everything. It meant building the feature I'd avoided because it was messy. A dispute system where small carriers could challenge loads without losing rank. It meant writing emails that didn't sound like victory laps. 3 weeks later, the numbers told a cleaner story than any pitch. On-time pickups up, idle hours down, cancellations resolved without penalties. I forwarded the report to the board with a single sentence. We choose the hard way. The market can tell. No adjectives, no spin. Ava sent a final message the day her exit cleared. I hope you're happy. I typed and deleted 3 versions before I landed on the only one that wouldn't keep me up. I'm responsible. That was the point. Revenge wasn't the emails or the firings or the claws I buried on a bad night. Revenge was choosing the thing they never thought I'd choose, standards that held even when I wanted to hurt them back. I put the coin away. I wouldn't need it for a while. A state investigator wanted records of every contract offer we'd sent in the last year. Someone had filed a complaint alleging coercive practices and retaliation against small carriers. The timeline lined up with Marcus's firing and Ava's exit. I didn't guess. I checked. The complaint cited clauses we'd already killed, penalties buried in Marcus's draft. I called our counsel, pulled the logs, and wrote a cover letter myself. No spin, just facts. When the clauses appeared, who proposed them, when I declined, and when the transparency portal went live. I added raw emails and redlined PDFs. If we got hauled in, I wanted to walk in with receipts, not speeches. While we assembled the package, the platform flickered. Not down, off balance. Dispatchers messaged that phantom cancellations were hitting clusters of loads, then reappearing minutes later. It smelled like someone stress testing our trust. I pulled the incident feed. The cancellations came from a handful of new accounts with clean paperwork and prepaid cards. I throttled their permissions and traced the IPs. A block of addresses matched a workspace used by a competitor Marcus had courted. I logged the evidence, added a rate limiter that shadow-banned repeat offenders, and posted a short status. We're seeing noise. Your loads are safe. If anything moves, you'll see it. Support tickets dropped within the hour. Marcus emailed that night. You're out of your depth. Regulators don't care about your intentions, they care about leverage. I forwarded his note to counsel and returned to work. We weren't going to win by outrage. We'd win by being predictable in a world that liked games. The investigator called back a week later. "Thanks for the records," she said. "We also received a packet of emails from a concerned shareholder suggesting you staged the escrow delay to manipulate valuation." "Happy to provide server logs," I said, "and phone records and the wire that left without board authorization." Silence then. "Come in Monday." I went in. No posture, just a binder. I walked through the maintenance log, the timeline, the draft exclusivity contracts, the packet of fake cancellations, the emails to a competitor. I didn't mention names unless asked. When they did, I answered. At the end, the investigator closed the file and said, "You seem to have made enemies." "I prefer competitors," I said. "Enemies waste time." 2 days later, the office received a civil demand letter naming Marcus for tortious interference and breach of duty. It didn't come from us. It came from the board based on the logs I'd shown. They moved faster than I expected. Consequences had finally outrun charisma. Ava tried a different route. She notified the company she intended to sell her remaining shares to a private fund that specialized in platform rationalization, which was a clean phrase for squeezing margins with locks. Our shareholder agreement gave us right of first refusal. I didn't have the cash. The people who did would want terms we'd spent months avoiding. I drove to the carriers who'd taken a chance on our pilot. 5 owners sat with me in a rental room next to a dispatch office that smelled like long hours and cut coffee. I laid out the option. We create a cooperative side vehicle. They buy Ava's shares at the same price. They get voting rights on product decisions and a dividend tied to reduced idle hours. They didn't clap. They asked hard questions about control, dilution, and what would happen if I ever flinched the way she did. When we finished, one owner said, "You keep the promises public, we'll keep the pressure private." They wired a commitment the next day. The board approved the co-op. Ava's sale fell through. Her last email to me contained one line, creative, no smiley face. The next attack arrived through rumor. A blog posted that we were quietly reintroducing exclusivity under another name. The post linked to an old screenshot of a draft policy, my red line still visible, cropped to hide the part where I'd cut it. I answered with a short thread, the full draft, the cut, the date the transparency portal launched, the daily changelog going forward. No adjectives. People shared the log more than the thread. Good. Logs don't need charisma. Numbers did what they do when you stop fighting shadows and ship. On-time pickups climbed, disputes resolved in under 4 hours. Churn dipped again. A regional union asked to send an observer to our product meetings. I said yes and assigned them a chair. Marcus resurfaced with a lawsuit claiming wrongful termination and IP theft. The board's counsel responded with the disclosure of his emails to a competitor and a request for sanctions over the fake cancellations. A week later, he withdrew the suit and posted a long message about creative differences. No one engaged. Silence found him again. The investigator from the state returned with a proposed consent order. No exclusivity, no shadow penalties, independent audits twice a year. I signed before she finished describing the audit firm. If we were what we said we were, audits would help, not hurt. The order went public. The blog that had accused us ran a grudging update. I didn't ask for a correction. Let the record breathe. The only real fight left was inside. One director wanted to chase growth with referral bounties that would tilt bids toward the biggest shippers. "Everyone does it," he said. "It's not a lock, it's an incentive." "It's a tilted table," I said. "Same effect, different label." He asked for a vote. I asked for a week and scheduled open office hours for carriers and drivers to weigh in. They showed up with screens of routes that would disappear under a bounty model and invoices that would age while they waited for bigger accounts to eat first. The director watched the session without speaking, then texted me after, "Table it." Not long after, the investigator closed the case with a public note. Violations alleged, remediation documented, ongoing audits in place. No fines. The platform didn't cheer. It just kept running. On a Friday, an email from Ava arrived. No subject, no greeting. A scanned letter from a charity that funded legal aid for small business owners. She'd made a gift in my mother's name. I hadn't told her that name. At the bottom she'd written, "For once, let a deed stand alone." I stared at the screen and felt nothing easy. She'd tried to buy Grace at wholesale. It wasn't mine to sell. I filed the letter with the subpoenas and the contracts and the logs, a box of things that built the road under me whether I liked it or not. That night, I drove to the lake and left the coin in the glove box. Heads and tails had done their job. Get me moving when I froze, make me pause when I wanted to sprint. I didn't need a flip to know the next turn. I'd show up Monday, ship small improvements, publish the log, and keep the door open for anyone who wanted to check my work. Revenge wasn't a headline or a courtroom win. It was waking up and finding there was nothing left they could take because I'd stopped trading my standards for speed. The rest would take care of itself, slowly, publicly, with receipts. The fourth storm didn't come from Marcus or Ava. It came from inside the network. A mid-sized carrier from Kansas, one of the early adopters, flagged a series of bids that looked clean but always resolved in favor of the same three companies. The bids weren't winning on price or route fit, they were winning on timing, slipping in seconds before close with offers that matched the runner-up by a single cent. On paper, that was legal. In practice, it smelled like someone was feeding them intel from inside the platform. I pulled the bid logs and ran a compare. The pattern was surgical, 32 wins in 2 weeks, all in high-margin lanes. The access trail pointed to a user account tied to a small dispatch service we'd approved 6 months ago. Its paperwork checked out, its behavior didn't. When I dug deeper, the dispatch service's contact email matched a domain registered by a holding company, one that appeared in Marcus's old correspondence. I didn't email, I didn't call. I locked the account pending verification and sent a message to every carrier that had lost bids to those companies, outlining the anomaly. No accusations, just the math and the lock notice. If the leak had friends inside, I wanted them to know daylight was coming. By morning, the holding company's lawyer was on the line, threatening to sue for commercial defamation. I invited him to the audit. He declined. The board backed the lock, citing our consent order's commitment to fairness. The carriers who'd been losing those lanes didn't send flowers. They sent screenshots of new bids closing clean. That same week, the independent auditors arrived for the first semi-annual check. 2 people, sharp questions, no small talk. They pulled our server configs, sampled random transactions, and traced them from bid to payout. I'd built the systems expecting to be audited, so nothing broke under their hands. What surprised me was their curiosity about process, not just compliance. One asked, "Why publish logs daily when the order only requires quarterly transparency?" "Because the bad stuff doesn't wait 3 months," I said. Their preliminary report was clean. The final report would be public, as required. Another receipt. 3 days later, a carrier from Texas called me directly. He'd been approached by someone claiming they could guarantee him lanes if he paid a monthly priority fee. The someone used a throwaway number but name-dropped a junior support rep from our team. I pulled the rep's access logs. Too many after-hours queries, too many searches on high-volume shippers. I called him in. He didn't deny it. "It's not like it hurts anyone," he said, "just giving smaller guys a boost." "Boosts don't come with price tags," I told him. He resigned on the spot. I documented everything, revoked his access, and notified the auditors. It wasn't fun watching someone walk out, but letting him stay would have burned the whole premise. Word of the priority fee offer spread anyway. A trade newsletter ran a piece suggesting our system was already breeding side hustles. I responded the same way I always had, posted the incident log, the fix, and the policy update banning any off-platform bid services tied to active accounts. The article updated with the headline, "Startup posts its own scandals before anyone else can." I could live with that. Amid all this, a letter from the state arrived, a request to testify at a logistics oversight hearing about digital market integrity. It wasn't an accusation, more like a stage. I knew who'd be there: platform execs who loved exclusivity, brokers who lived on hidden fees, lobbyists fluent in polite sabotage. I agreed, but only if I could bring data. The night before the hearing, I sat with 3 spreadsheets, one showing how idle hours dropped 18% across co-op members since launch, one mapping the bid manipulation attempts we'd caught and blocked, one showing churn rates after we published daily logs, no adjectives, just lines and numbers. At the hearing, the questions came predictable. Wasn't transparency expensive? Didn't constant auditing slow growth? Wasn't exclusivity sometimes necessary to ensure service quality? Expensive compared to what? I asked. Paying lawyers to defend traps, replacing trust when you break it, and exclusivity doesn't guarantee quality, it guarantees dependence. A lobbyist tried to paint our model as unsustainable at scale. I pointed to the co-op's numbers. Scale without trust collapses. We're still here. One lawmaker asked what I'd do if offered $1 billion buyout tomorrow. Depends who's offering, I said, and what they'd have to delete to close the deal. After the hearing, 2 carriers I'd never met shook my hand and said they'd applied that morning. That was the win. Not applause in the room, but someone betting their work on ours after hearing every reason not to. The next week brought something I didn't expect, an email from Ava. Subject, proposal. Body, no tricks. Read it. Attached was a plan for a new venture, a platform for small manufacturers to pool resources for distribution. Clean terms, no exclusivity, shared governance baked in. Learned a few things, her note said. I read it twice. It was good. It also came from someone who'd once tried to gut me for a faster exit. I didn't reply that day, or the next. On the 3rd day, I wrote, "Build it without me. If it's real, I'll be your first customer." She answered with one word: fair. By quarter's end, the auditor's final report landed. No violations, no hidden fees, improved competitive access. The board circulated it with a 1-line summary. We said we'd do this. We did. The report got shared in forums faster than any press release we'd paid for. The day the report went public, I received a plain envelope in the mail. Inside was the coin I'd left in my glove box months ago, taped to an index card. No note, no signature, just the coin. I didn't wonder how it got there. Some things didn't need tracing. I put it back in my pocket, not as a compass, but as a reminder. The flips had stopped mattering, the calls didn't. Because revenge wasn't the subpoenas, the firings, or even the audits. It was the fact that, after every attempt to bend this thing toward the old games, it was still standing the way it was built, open, checked, and unwilling to sell itself cheap. That was the part they couldn't take back. A federal agency floated a pilot for time-sensitive shipments. The budget was real, the impact bigger. The catch hid on page 9, exclusivity across 3 corridors to ensure reliability. That was the door everyone else walked through. I sent a 1-line reply. We can meet your deadlines without locking anyone in. If that's unacceptable, decline our bid. An hour later, a lobbyist posted that we'd refused to guarantee service. The story traveled faster than the RFP. Shippers started asking if we were scared of scale. I published our bid and the clause we refused. No adjectives. The agency called the next day. If you can prove reliability without exclusivity, you're still in. Proof meant risk. I said yes. We built a public tracker for the pilot. Every pickup window, every handoff, every delay with a reason code. No names, just lanes and timestamps. Competitors could watch us miss. Carriers could see if we were fair under pressure. For 2 weeks, the graph looked steady. Then 3 storms hit the Midwest. The tracker turned into a wall of yellow. A broker DM'd a screenshot with a smiley. Still enjoying transparency? I moved overflow to co-op members who had room, waived a fee that would have covered the pain, and wrote a brief at midnight. We missed 8 windows. Here's what we changed at 21:17 to stop it from becoming 80. The agency signed the pilot. They also cut the exclusivity clause from the final contract template. The lobbyist didn't post a correction. The tracker was the correction. Marcus tried to change the channel. A podcast booked him for a segment about founder myth-making, and he told a clean story. I'd staged escrow drama, sabotaged growth, and seized control under the banner of virtue. I wasn't going to jump into a back and forth he needed to stay visible. Instead, I uploaded a compressed archive, governance minutes, wire confirmations, red lines, audit letters, the consent order. Then I turned off comments. A week later, the podcast issued a follow-up. Key documents contradict prior guests' claims. He stopped getting booked. Ava launched her new venture without me. She called it a working title and didn't dress it up. Her first customers were 2 shops that could barely fill a pallet on their own. She sent an API request to pull available driver capacity from our side. Standard rates, no favors, her note said. I approved the key. When her team pushed an update that caused a mismatch on a Friday night, she admitted it in her own log and rolled back. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. She had learned the only lesson that mattered. Inside our house, Strain found a new seam. A director wanted faster growth by bundling credit advances with loads. On paper, it would help carriers bridge cash. In practice, it would anchor them to us through debt. We're just offering convenience, he said. They can say no. They can say no until they can't, I answered. He pushed for a vote. I opened the channel to carriers again. They told us how debt inched into control, invoice by invoice. The vote died in the room. Then came a subpoena for the competitor Marcus had courted. The state was investigating bid rigging. I wasn't called to testify, my logs were. Months earlier, that would have felt like vindication. This time, it just felt like the next page. The competitor settled and agreed to audits. Marcus posted a long note about moving on. He was already selling advice to people who hadn't read the last 3 chapters. Our audit came due again. The team sat in for a week and left with fewer questions than before. They flagged one edge case we'd missed. Dispute resolutions over holidays took too long. We fixed it by shifting review windows and publishing the change. Small, boring, right? The kind of fix you brag about only by shipping it. A reporter asked if revenge still motivated me. I told him no. Revenge is a burst. Stewardship is a practice. He didn't use the line. It didn't sing. I didn't mind. One morning, a carrier from Ohio called to say he was shutting down after 20 years. Not because of us, because he was tired. You did good, he said. Don't chase size and lose the point. After the call, I wrote a simple rule into the roadmap. Any feature that adds friction without returning time doesn't ship. We pinned it to the board. The agency expanded the contract. The co-op voted to keep dividends tied to reduced idle hours rather than profit alone. A trade group asked me to keynote a conference. I declined and sent our ops lead instead. Her talk was 15 minutes and ended with the daily log URL. People clapped anyway. 2 months after Ava's launch, she asked for a meeting, not to partner, to audit each other's APIs for blind spots. We sat in a plain room with 2 laptops and a shared spreadsheet. No old fights, no apologies, just requests and fixes. At the end, she said, I thought getting caught would be the worst day. It wasn't, I said. No, she agreed. The worst day was realizing I liked getting away with it. She closed her laptop. I don't want to like that again. Then don't, I said. We left it there. The last loose end arrived by courier, a class action draft from a firm fishing for plaintiffs, alleging we coerced carriers through opaque rules. The exhibits were screenshots of policies we'd posted and retired months ago. I emailed the firm the full policy timeline and the audit letters. They withdrew. I published the exchange with dates. A commenter wrote, "Boring receipts win again. Good." On the anniversary of launch, I opened the first status post we'd ever published and read it line by line. Some parts were naive, none were lies. I wrote a new post that said only this: Year 1, we kept our promises under pressure. Year 2, same plan, tougher tests. I hit publish and went back to the ticket queue. If there was a victory, it lived in the quiet. Loads that moved without drama, disputes that ended without traps, hearings that ended without fines. A rival forced into audits by the same daylight they mocked. A former partner who learned to ship without bending the floor. The coin stayed in my pocket, not for luck, but as a weight I could feel when choices got soft. They thought the win would be a headline, a settlement, a stage. It wasn't. The win was refusing to trade the people who trusted us for a faster quarter, even when every shortcut came gift-wrapped. That was the revenge they never saw coming, and it kept working long after their names stopped showing up in my inbox. Year 2 began with a notice from the Federal Trade Commission, not an investigation, an invitation. They were assembling an industry working group to draft voluntary guidelines for digital freight markets. On the list were executives from the largest brokers, lobbyists from shipper councils, and a few smaller operators with reputations for ethical innovation. We'd been placed in the latter category. I'd learned enough to know voluntary guidelines often become the backbone of regulation. I accepted, but on the condition that all drafts be public. They agreed, maybe assuming nothing contentious would make it that far. The first sessions were predictable. Large brokers pushed flexible transparency, meaning they could choose when to disclose fees. Lobbyists argued that open bidding could destabilize service. I kept asking for data to prove it. They kept changing the subject. By the third meeting, the moderator gave me the floor for an entire afternoon. I presented 3 years of bid, fulfillment, and dispute resolution data from our system, anonymized, time-stamped, and published live during the session so anyone could check it against our daily logs. When the meeting ended, 2 mid-tier brokers pulled me aside. They wanted to explore co-op-style governance for their smaller lanes. "We can't win the big accounts," one said, "but we can keep the small ones fair." I didn't promise anything except a follow-up call. Back home, our own platform was dealing with its first real technical failure. A database migration collided with a carrier API update, duplicating thousands of bids. It wasn't malicious, just messy. I made the decision to freeze new bids for 12 hours while we cleared the queue. The support lines lit up. A few shippers hinted they'd move volume elsewhere. I didn't rush the fix to keep them. We cleaned the mess, posted the cause and timeline, and pushed a patch that made the same conflict impossible. The following week, volume returned to baseline. Some carriers wrote to thank us for pausing instead of pushing garbage through. 2 months later, the working group's first public draft landed. The big players had removed the requirement for daily or even weekly reporting, replacing it with quarterly summaries upon request. I posted a side-by-side comparison of the original and revised text, highlighting every cut. I didn't add commentary. The industry press did that for me, running headlines about transparency being negotiated away. The FTC chair asked for a private call. I said no, keep it in the open. They agreed to host an extra session to debate the cuts. It didn't restore everything, but it brought back monthly reporting and mandatory disclosure of any exclusivity clauses. Marcus's name came up again when a carrier sent me an offer sheet from a consultant promising premium access to lanes we serviced. The language was vague, but the shell company behind it traced to his new outfit. I forwarded the sheet to our compliance lead, who filed a formal complaint with the state using the consent order as leverage. Weeks later, the state announced fines against the consultant for misrepresentation of market access. His company website went offline within a day. Ava's manufacturing platform started gaining traction. She emailed asking if we could integrate more directly so her clients could see available capacity in real time. I told her we'd give them the same access any partner got: API keys, documentation, no shortcuts. She accepted without pushback. Watching her work clean was strange. She published her own changelogs, sometimes catching bugs before we did. It didn't erase the past, but it proved she could run without stepping on throats. Mid-year, the agency that had awarded us the time-sensitive shipment contract asked for a 3-year extension. The only change, they wanted us to handle an additional corridor that had been plagued with delays under another provider. We agreed, but kept the tracker public. The delays dropped by half in the first quarter, not because we were perfect, but because carriers knew they'd be visible. Inside the company, pressure came from a different angle. A new board member suggested we start value tiering service, giving priority support and faster dispute resolution to higher volume accounts. It's not exclusion, he argued, it's incentive. It's stratification, I said, and it means the smallest carriers wait longest for fairness. I opened the proposal to public comment. The backlash was immediate and loud. The board shelved the idea in a day. By autumn, the FTC working group had finalized its guidelines. They weren't perfect, but they codified 2 principles we'd fought for: mandatory disclosure of exclusivity terms and regular reporting of fee structures. The big brokers signed on reluctantly, hoping compliance would be easy to game. Maybe it would, but the paper trail was there now, and anyone who cared could follow it. The last test of the year came from the press. A journalist I respected called to say she was running a long piece on the quiet war over freight transparency and wanted on-record comments about Marcus, Ava, and our fights with the board. I told her she could quote any public document we'd published, but I wouldn't add personal color. That's not the story, I said. The story is what's in the logs. She ran the piece without the drama, ending with a screenshot of our daily portal and a caption that read, "The receipts are boring. That's why they work." On the last day of the year, I opened the first daily log entry we'd ever posted and compared it to the one we published that morning. Different lanes, different numbers, same rules. That was the point. Not a clean arc from betrayal to victory, but a straight line we kept drawing in the same place no matter who tried to bend it. The coins stayed in my desk. I didn't need to flip it anymore. The decisions weren't guesses. They were the same answer, repeated until even the people who'd bet against it had to admit it wasn't luck. It was the work, and it was still holding.